Crikey, talk about an up and down year for TSM, eh? In the space of a year, they've gone from being dumped out of spring playoffs by FlyQuest, to winning summer's playoffs, to being unable to even notch a single win at Worlds. As if that wasn't enough for TSM fans, they've now had to deal with Bjergsen and Doublift retiring. It's safe to say many TSM fans have been left a bit confused about what to expect for this coming year. We're here to help, fellas, don't worry. In our latest episode of What to Expect, we're going to break down what should we anticipate from TSM in 2021. First off, let's start with the departures. It was incredibly well publicised that Bjergsen's retired and will be the team's head coach going forward. This was a massive move to see. Bjergsen's been the best mid laner in NA for quite some time, and he still easily could have another couple of years left in the tank if he wanted to do it. Even when the team were in some really dire straits, TSM could rely on the Bjerger King to bail them out with a carry performance. Next up is Doublift. This was another one that sort of came as a bolt out of the blue. It was expected he'd stay playing for another year providing SwordArt joined. There were some problems with the transfer, it looked like it was falling through, Doublift retired, but then the next day SwordArt was announced. Strange stuff, I can't say I understand too much about the internals. Broken Blade has also been offloaded, with the German/Turkish top laner heading off to play for Schalke 04 in EU. I feel this is a bit of a raw deal for Broken Blade. Personally, I thought he was pretty good last year. And finally, Biofrost has been released in favour of signing SwordArt as mentioned above. Now, let's break down the replacements for these players and take a look at how they match up in terms of stats. Let's start from the top lane, and filling in this year for TSM is Huni. Show of hands if you ever saw this move happening way back when Huni was smurfing it on Fnatic, because I certainly didn't. Goes without saying that not too many TSM fans will be that enamoured with this pickup. Huni's coming off of one of the weakest years of his career on Dignitas and then Evil Geniuses. Stat-wise, Huni lost most of the laning phases he played in 2020. He was ahead in CS at 15 minutes in just 34.7% of his games, and on average he was over 340 XP behind his opponent at 15 minutes. On the inverse, Broken Blade was ahead in CS in 53.2% of his games, went more or less even in terms of XP differential, and was on average 250 gold ahead of his opponent at the 15-minute mark. Broken Blade also has a much deeper champion pool than Huni does, having played 23 unique champions this year, compared to Huni's 17. It's also worth noting that Huni only has a win rate above 50% on 2 of these, whereas Broken Blade has over 50% win rates on 12 of his. In terms of needing to offload Broken Blade to open up an import slot, I understand this move, but I can't help but feel they could have got someone a bit more reliable in the current climate. Impact and Licorice were both available, they both have NA residency, and TSM's pull is strong. I imagine they would have moved to experience the #Baylife if TSM had lodged some serious offers for them. Next up, Power of Evil moves into the mid lane to replace Bjergsen. Wow, talk about some big shoes to fill. Needless to say though, if anyone could continue the mid lane legacy at TSM, I put my bets on PoE. He was one of the strongest mid laners in Europe when he left, and has been consistently one of the top scorers in our fantasy game in 2020. In terms of personal stats from the past year, Power of Evil is actually beating Bjergsen. Now wait, before you dislike the video and leave me a mean comment, there's a lot to take into account. TSM weren't playing that well for a decent portion of the year, and only really found great form towards the summer playoffs, whereas FlyQuest, PoE's former team, were pretty solid throughout. PoE was on average 7.5 CS and 273 gold up on his opponents at 15 minutes, whereas Bjergsen was 0.2% ahead on CS and 85 gold ahead of his laner. Lane stats aside, PoE is also more prevalent in teamfights, dealing on average 29.6% of the team's damage, whereas Bjergsen is just behind him with 26.3%. Bjergsen has the much deeper champion pool based on champs played last year though. Bjergsen played 22 unique champions in Season 10, Power of Evil played just 12. It's going to be easier for teams to target ban PoE, as he doesn't have the champions on the level of Bjergsen Zillion to fall back on if there's a load of bans thrown his way. If you ban out Azir, Orianna and Syndra, PoE's pushed a bit further out of his comfort zone. Finally, one thing we can't break down with stats is team cohesion, of which Bjergsen had absolutely no problem with. It remains to be seen if PoE can gel with the new squad as well as Bjergsen did, but if he does, I think this could be a great signing. Replacing Doublift is Lost. This guy's been on the TSM Academy for a year now, and he was last seen in the LCS on Echo Fox. Yeah, remember those guys? Replacing Doublift is a big old ask, no two ways about it, but this guy looks pretty decent, and if he can keep pace with what he was showing us on TSM Academy, he'll fit in no time at all. In terms of laning, Doublift was always known as a very strong laner, but this past year his stats took a bit of a hit. He was ahead by on average 2.5 CS and 82 XP at 15 minutes, but on average he was about 92 gold behind his opponent at that time. Lost, on the other hand, was on average 6.6 CS ahead and 395 gold ahead of his opponent, but was around 58 XP behind at 15 minutes. Swings and roundabouts, but the stats do lean a little bit more in favour of Lost. Lost also leads in takedowns and damage percentage. He dealt on average 27.3% of TSM Academy's damage in Season 10 and had 0.3 takedowns a minute, whereas Doublift comes in just behind at 27.2% of the team's damage and 0.22 takedowns a minute. Largely, these stats don't tell us too much, except Lost was slightly better last year, but that's likely down to the disparity in competition. Time will tell on if Lost is a good pickup, but I believe if TSM fans don't jump down his throat whenever he makes a mistake, he could turn out to be a great signing. And finally, the move that had everyone talking, SwordArt. There's no two ways about this one. SwordArt coming in is a massive boon for TSM and the LCS as a whole. The move's up there with Perks joining Cloud9. A legendary support's just what Lost needs to truly hone his skills and find his feet in the LCS, and I for one can't wait to see what the X-Sooning and Flashball support can do in NA. While SwordArt for Biofrost is a massive upgrade, on the stats side of things the two aren't that dissimilar, funnily enough. In Season 10, Biofrost was ahead by 0.2 CS at 15 minutes, and was only behind in gold and XP at 15 minutes by 40 and 34 respectively. SwordArt was ahead in CS by 0.7 at 15, on average was 3 gold ahead of his opponent, which is negligible, and 19 XP up at 15 as well. In terms of kills and assists per minute, Biofrost sits at 0.22 takedowns a minute, whereas SwordArt sits just higher at 0.29. SwordArt's 16 unique champions just edges Biofrost's 15. On their most played champions, Biofrost has a higher win percentage on Rakan at 82.4% compared to SwordArt's 73.1% on Leona. However, there's a lot to bear in mind with this. First off, the level of competition. SwordArt was in the LPL last year, a league where world champions are a dime a dozen, and that's been head and shoulders above almost every other region for the past few years. SwordArt wasn't even on the best team either. Suning were pretty average in the LPL until midway through summer. Biofrosting on the hand was playing in NA. It's fairly incomparable in terms of skill level. SwordArt's also played many more games in Season 10 than Biofrost has due to league formats. His 73.1% win rate on Leona isn't as high as on Bio's Rakan, but he's played 9 more games with Leona this year than Biofrost has on Rakan. Overall, this proves that stats don't mean everything, but you know what does mean something? Making a Worlds final. I fully expect SwordArt to be a brilliant addition to TSM and a massive boost to their chances of actually making it out of groups. If they can't do it with SwordArt, they won't do it with anyone. Overall, I think TSM are going to be a good team this year, but it's a tough one to call. They've upgraded in some roles, downgraded in some roles, and have gone even or unchanged in some. If Lost gels well with SwordArt and SwordArt lands on his feet in NA, I can definitely see TSM being a dark horse for the playoffs title. But it's going to be a long league this year for NA teams, and anything could happen. We'll have to wait and see. Thanks for watching our video. Let us know what you think TSM will be up to in 2021, and tell us what team you want to see next. We'll see you soon.